Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Policy and Practice's latest webinar. Today we're talking about coronavirus stories from the front line, and it's great to see you on the webinar today. Thank you very much for joining us. So to kick us off and as we get started, just a little bit of housekeeping. If you could raise your digital hand, somebody's ahead of me, in the panel on the right-hand side to do the audio check, that's wonderful. This is where you ask questions in this box as well. We'll be having a poll midway through today's webinar, and there'll be a survey at the end, quite an important survey at the end, so please do stick around for that. We do hope to have you on your way by 11:30, and be assured that the slides and this recording will be automatically sent to you, so don't feel that you have to rush to keep taking lots of notes. We're also, for the first time, live tweeting today via policy_practice, our Twitter handle. So if you are on Twitter as well, please do join us and follow the hashtag Frontline Stories and do join in. Brilliant, thank you so much. And thank you everybody for your hands raised. Thank you so much. Please do ask the questions in that panel as well as we go through the webinar today. So we have a great agenda today, great group of speakers. Delighted to introduce you to Grant Bailey from Cheltenham Borough Homes. Grant, would you like to say hello?
Good morning, everybody.
Thank you, Grant. We also have Ellie Kershaw from London Borough of Tower Hamlets. Do you want to say hello, Ellie?
Morning, everyone.
Thanks, Ellie. And also my colleague Jade Alsop from Policy and Practice. Do you want to say hello, Jade? Jade's on the call. I know she is. She's probably just muted. And that's myself as well, Janet Harkin. I'm from Policy and Practice too. So thanks, everybody. And thanks to our speakers for joining us today. We're delighted, really pleased that Grant and Ellie are joining us today. So just a little bit about us before we get started. And for those of you who might be new to Policy and Practice, we help organisations like you to give the best support you can to help people on their way. We do this by analysing the impacts of welfare policy, and we've developed our award-winning benefits and budgeting calculator software to help organisations to dissolve the complexities of the welfare system, while our data analytics dashboard helps local authorities to identify vulnerability, target support and track change. We're going to be hearing a bit more about all of those things today from our speakers. So the agenda that we're going to be talking about here, as you can see on the screen, what the past and present looks like for our two organisations and their customers. I'll look at a little bit about how our software is helping them with that, and what challenges these organisations are facing in the future, and what they're going to do to tackle them, and also question and answers at the end as well. Questions throughout, though, as they occur to you. We'll have plenty of time at the end to answer them. So that's brilliant. Thank you so much. So now it's time to introduce our speakers. So I'm going to hand over, Grant, to yourself to talk to us about Cheltenham Borough Homes and the work you do there. Over to you, Grant.
Super. Good morning, everybody. So my name's Grant Bailey, Benefit Money Advice Team Leader at Cheltenham Borough Homes. We're a small team, and we have 5,000 properties just over. We also have a colleague Benefit Money Advice Officer who's part of the homelessness prevention team who was TP'd over to us around about 2004, 2005. She's available in Cheltenham to help people with benefit advice that aren't Cheltenham Borough Homes residents. My team focus solely on the support of Cheltenham Borough Homes tenants and leaseholders, and we try in the past, if you like, our normal, if there is such thing at the moment, of having a bit of a structured week. We would try and have Mondays and Tuesdays for visits, seeing those that are most vulnerable, helping people with their sort of IT and support needs. We'd have Wednesdays at the job centre to do drop-in surgeries and work close with our JCP colleagues and partners. Thursdays at a community resource centre, and Fridays we try and have team time, reading up on sort of changes of legislation, refreshing ourselves in terms of our knowledge, benefit calculations, obviously. But as you can imagine, everything's sort of changed quite a bit. We ordinarily like to do a lot of face-to-face work because we believe strongly that you can actually build a stronger relationship with people, but also gauge reactions to some questions, some very challenging questions at times that need to be asked. And you can actually sort of, once you've built that rapport, you can actually sort of push a little bit more and try and sort of say, are you okay? Is everything okay with your family? Is everything okay with your health? Is everything okay with your money? And from our point of view, we've been focusing on debts and referring to specialists, but also on the concerns over illegal money lending. We've been working with the illegal money lending team now since 2012, early 2012. I joined Cheltenham Borough Homes at the end of 2011, having spent 2 years at the job centre, having had a spell of redundancy through the last recession. So I've seen sort of benefits from claiming benefits to working in benefits now to supporting people with benefits. And each of those angles, there's been quite an apparent difference in people's ability and capabilities, if you like, to access finances, credit, and seeing again how my situation changed. People were willing to talk to me, people were willing to give me payment breaks, etc. From my time at the job centre, and then, if you like, moving on to Cheltenham Borough Homes and seeing the same client group, there was always questions, why do you need another crisis loan? Why are you struggling to pay your rent? Why are you falling behind your payment arrangements? And it was obvious that sometimes gauging people's reaction that there was more to this. So we sought help from the illegal money lending team.
That's great, thank you, Grant. And you use policy and practices benefit and budgeting calculator in your current work with tenants as well. I know, but we're going to talk a little bit about that in a bit more detail when we talk about the challenges, past, present, and future. Ellie, let me come to you now. Do you want to introduce us to London Borough of Tower Hamlets?
Yeah. So Tower Hamlets is have some very particular issues. We're one of the most deprived boroughs in the country. As you can see, we've got well, prior to this, we had 2 in 5 households living in poverty. And unlike most people, we do have an issue with pensioner poverty as well as with child poverty. So 51% of our older residents are living in poverty. But also about around 31% of children, but that is pre-housing costs. When you take housing costs into account, that jumps up to 37%. So we are looking at huge swathes of people that are living in poverty. Obviously, the current situation has exacerbated that due to the types of economy that we have. We've got large numbers of people working within the gig economy, large amounts of people working in hospitality. Because of our particular issues, the council about 3 years ago made tackling poverty a priority, and that's when the tackling poverty team was created. So I came from that, from having worked in local authority for quite a number of years, but on the homelessness side, both in Doncaster and in Maidstone. So quite a range of different types of authorities, each with very different problems. What I found working in homelessness was that I gradually got more and more frustrated with trying to sort out people's homelessness, but that's literally what we did. We didn't try and sort out the underlying problems. We didn't work out, what had made them homeless in the first place and what could we do to sort those kind of things out. And that wasn't for a lack of will. It's because it's not what councils are really paid to do. There are obviously various programs that we run, but we don't have anything generally that really gets behind the root causes of poverty and how we can actually sort those out. So obviously when I saw this role at Tower Hamlets, looking to do just that, it was of real interest. So we have 2 sides to my team. We have one side which like Grant said, works directly with residents, helping them to make universal credit claims, to make claims for discretionary housing payments, to do income maximisation, link them in with various job opportunities, and do a lot of that very on the ground personal work. The other side of my team works on a projects basis. So we do a lot of research. We look at new government policy as it comes out, with obviously things that Joseph Rowntree and Resolution Foundation and other people are bringing out. We then apply those issues to Tower Hamlets and create projects that will hopefully help our residents to get around those kind of things. We use my outreach team use the benefits and budgeting calculator, and they find that really useful. But for us, the real gem is the LIFT dashboard, which we use in a huge amount of ways. We, to find the right people, to run things in certain areas. We use it to place bids to show where our poverty levels are, to show where the key cohorts of people that would actually benefit from certain interventions would be. and the speed at which it does it compared to what it would take us in officer time is great, and it's allowed us to get on with a lot more of the proactive type of work that we're trying to get on and do.
Brilliant, Ellie, thank you so much. And I know we're going to come back to some of those points that you raised there later on in the webinar. So if I move on then, so the way we're structuring today is past, present and future. So in the past, which feels like a long time ago, but actually it was what, 8 weeks ago? So it's not really a long time at all. But in the past, want to now get Grant and Ellie to talk about the number one issue. You know, how did you immediately respond when coronavirus first hit your organisation? Grant, take us through it. What happened at Cheltenham Borough Homes?
So as I touched on earlier, we had a very rigid, structured week, if you like, and it was to sort of test and if you like, innovate every time we sort of got feedback from customers, and it seemed to be they liked the fact that we had this structure with a drop in on a Wednesday at the job centre and a community resource centre on a Thursday, and we were available usually said sort of for phone calls and benefit calculations on a Friday afternoon and sort of teamwork. We had to adjust very quickly. The more and more sort of organisations that were, particularly the job centre, that were sort of looking at social distancing, etc. Our own teams were being sent home and we were having skeleton staff in the office, myself being one of those. It became sort of immediately apparent that the service that we'd spent the last sort of 8.5 years building and perfecting where we could, I'm sure many other listeners are in exactly the same boat. We were unable to do those sort of primary things like the face-to-face. I mean, we had 4 job clubs, employability clubs that my colleagues would run. We would identify people that were quite far away from the job market. We would help them out with the income maximisation, as Ellie said. We would have some very challenging conversations with them and sort of some home truths at times. If there was sort of any issues with regards to sort of possession proceedings, we would encourage them with the benefit calculator to show sort of, how work would make their situation better, and we would encourage them to come and meet our employment initiatives team. Our drop-ins, as I've mentioned, we would do the ad hoc visits to those that weren't actually responding and at risk, and we'd obviously then identify any sort of welfare issues that we could pass on to our tenancy management team. Obviously, as you said, that will change. The priority at the moment has been the guys on the ground, if you like, that are still out there. Tradesmen particularly that aren't able to do some of the sort of routine works. They've been fantastic. They've been joining into the community events, the county council sort of support hubs or food hubs. They've been delivering food. We've got other colleagues out there, as well as the tradesmen, sort of collecting prescriptions for vulnerable tenants. We've been doing a lot of welfare checks across the business. There always has been, to be fair, a togetherness, and I'm sure everybody else on the line is hearing the same. But it's been really great to see it in practice. People are coming together. They're the eyes and ears for other areas of the business. They're making welfare calls. They're picking up on somebody's actually saying that they've lost their job or somebody in the house has lost their job. So they're trying to get them through to us. We're obviously picking up a lot of concerns with regards to welfare in terms of mental well-being, etc. Timely being sort of Mental Health Awareness Week. So again, with all the resources we've got internally from mental health first aiders, but our partners out there, the qualified partners, they are providing us with a lot of links and information to give to people to try and help them. But the shift from face to face has been huge. We're doing everything we can at the moment on the phone. We're very fortunate to have the access to Teams for internal side of things. Again, we'll talk about it later, but it's sort of the idea of, can we do anything along the face-to-face side of things with tenants in the future. We've had a few staff redeployed in the business. Nobody's been furloughed, which is absolutely fantastic. I've been fortunate to have a lady from our windows and doors contract who is helping me out with, if you like, the best way of putting it is triage. My team has been impacted because we have one of our experienced benefit money advisors start maternity leave early because of coronavirus, and somebody who was helping me out with another section of my business was on a fixed term and has been redeployed elsewhere. So effectively my team's work's doubled, but our size is halved almost. So the redeployment has been fantastic because she's helping us identify those that are may be able to last another couple of days without some intervention, but actually identify those that are in serious need now and get them through to us as soon as possible.
Mm-hmm. Very interesting. Thanks, Grant. And we're going to, as I say, talk about some of those in more depth in a moment. Let me move to yourself, Ellie, then. At Tower Hamlets, so same question to you, it's a bit like blind date. Same question to you. In the past, way back 8 weeks ago, what was the first thing that kind of struck you that you needed to deal with, and how did you do that?
So the first thing to us was that because of the high levels of poverty that we already have, we knew that a lot more people would be impacted and that those already in poverty would be struggling further. So our initial thoughts were around how do we get food to people, how do we get money to people, particularly where people are isolating, how are we going to help those people, and how are we going to make sure that once we do put something in place, how are we going to make sure that people know that the council are here to support them. So over the last few weeks, the work that my team does has been completely reprioritised into purely dealing with food and hardship as related to coronavirus, and kind of everything else that we normally do has gone by the by somewhat. So we set up a self-isolation mailbox where people could let us know through that or through our contact centre that they were isolating and needing help with food or with financial issues, or befriending if they were alone, and a range of other things. We set up a food hub immediately, which that hub is only intended to support people that actually are isolating. But so far we've delivered to 4,500 households, or around 12,000 people, packages of food from that hub. Where people were suffering financially but weren't isolating, we have what is quite a generous comparatively to a lot of other places. We do have a crisis grant scheme, which we call our resident support scheme, which can give people small amounts of cash for food, for energy, in some circumstances white goods and that kind of thing, and there are a number of criteria to that. We immediately reduced some of those criteria so that people could make more than one application. We doubled the value of the food and energy voucher applications. We normally don't pay in certain circumstances where it's a benefit delay, but because of the huge increase in benefit applications, we've dropped that particular requirement for the fund. And over the last few weeks, we've had huge numbers of people who wouldn't normally qualify. We've spent about £60,000 on grants purely for people who would not normally qualify, which is close to double what we would normally spend. Our homelessness team, as with other authorities, was focusing on getting rough sleepers off the streets. And we noticed that in the first kind of couple of weeks, we had some very high levels of people contacting us, and then it went a little bit static. So we used analysis from the Lift dashboard to identify some key groups of people that we wanted to contact. So particularly those that we believed would be struggling financially, but who were also living alone. So we concentrated on pensioners to begin with, living alone, and sent communications out to all of those people to let them know what the council could offer to help with, and how we could actually help them. And at the same time that my team and the homelessness team were doing that work, our economic development team were working with people who had lost jobs or were at risk of losing jobs, and working very heavily with, obviously, a lot of our usual vacancies had died up, but supermarkets, for example, were very keen to recruit people. So one of the large supermarkets came to us at the end of March, and we had 265 applications within 2 days for those supermarket jobs. So they've all been working really hard as well. So our immediate response was, what do people need right this minute, and what can we do to get them those things? And then obviously we've started to move on to a more medium term response since then.
Yeah, brilliant, Ellie. Thanks for taking us through that. And I can see that people are asking questions and the hands are going up. So do keep those coming in. I'm sure that there'll be plenty of time towards the end of the webinar to ask Grant and Ellie more on everything here. Thanks. Sorry, Jade.
Yeah, hi everybody. Sorry, I had some technical issues there. Ellie, I did have a kind of a question for you on this already. You talked there about the analysis and identifying key groups. It would be good to know kind of what those key groups were that were identified through the dashboard, and then how you prioritize those. What made you start with that particular group?
Yeah, so the key groups that we looked at were people of pensionable age, people in large families, households where they were in receipt of some kind of disability or health related benefit. And then what we did was we initially prioritised the pensioners who were single, because we believed, and it does appear to have been right, that they would be the most likely to need support and to not have other people around them that could provide that support. And after we sent out our first letter, we did see quite a spike in people coming to us as a result of that. We then looked at the pensioners that were in households in couples, because obviously if one is isolating, they will both be isolating. So it's still likely that they would need support. And then we've moved on to larger families. So we have very large proportions of families of kind of 5, 6 plus. The largest family that we've been helping at the moment is a family of 9. So we do have an awful lot of large families within the borough, who obviously are impacted more than anybody else by welfare reforms, by benefit cuts. And for a number of those, there was a person in the household that was working. So what we're looking at from the next lift run will be to identify those that seem to have fallen out of employment. But we really wanted to concentrate on those large families, because we knew that someone falling out of employment there would have a far greater impact on the overall household and their ability to feed themselves and that kind of thing than for perhaps smaller families.
Brilliant, thank you.
Excellent, great. Okay, so let me move on to the poll that we want to do. So we want now to ask everybody on the webinar, ask the audience. So what are, and we're going to ask you before we then turn to Grant and Ellie and ask this question to them as well. So from your point of view, in your organisation, what are you struggling most with at the moment? So if I just bear with me, and I'll get this poll up and launched. And hopefully you should be able to see this on your screen. So basically the question is, what are you struggling most with at the moment? So the answers that we've given here, appreciate that it may be a combination of these answers, but we're just asking for one. Is it that you are struggling most with too much demand for your services? Is it that you're not reaching the most vulnerable people? Is it that you're worried about being too slow to get support to people fast enough? Is it that you're struggling with not having enough information or guidance to give to people? Or is it that you are struggling most with the uncertainty about what the future demand for your services might mean? So I can see that most people are voting, but I'll just give it a couple more seconds. And like I say, generally, I appreciate there's probably a combination of these issues, but it's looking quite obvious. So if I close that poll now, thank you very much for everybody who has voted, and I will show you this on the screen, and hopefully you'll be able to see this now. So, okay, on the screen, so what you can see then, 50% of you are saying that not reaching the most vulnerable people is the #1 thing that you're struggling with at the moment, and that is followed by at 29% uncertainty about future demand for your services. So very interesting results, and I would like to thank you very much. And I'm going to go straight now. I'm going to hide that poll and then carry back on with the webinar. And with that very much in mind, I'm going to ask Grant and Ellie about those points, and also about, from your point of view, Grant, what are you most struggling with at the moment? What are your issues?
Yeah, I echo what everybody else has voted on, really. There is a massive sort of combination of things that we are as a team concerned about as an organisation. Clearly, there's a lot of uncertainty, but I know that every department is feeding into our executive and leadership team with regards to ideas, suggestions, concerns, and they're all being listened to, which is, from an organisation or a colleague point of view, is reassuring. From my point of view, having set the service up and where we are right now, what I'm seeing is a huge demand in our service that we've been performing incredibly well to maintain. But I think that's down to the compassion of the people in the team and the desire to help. Maybe a bit like myself, where we've gone through something like this in the recession, is that I know how much it hurts. I know how scary it is to try and help people. But it's that what's the service going to look like in the future as well? We're almost looking at it. We're trying to sort of almost reinvent ourselves. We're trying to maybe use this as an opportunity to identify things that have worked well since we've been working from home, what maybe we could do more. But it's the frustration of our structure, our drop-ins. We had those that were really struggling to engage, or had maybe some issues with the job centre, maybe sanction related issues, or maybe not understanding, or they'd failed to respond on their journal. And it could be a combination of things, as they don't have access to IT or the knowledge, the capability to do so. So they were almost reliant on the charitable sector or support sector or ourselves to get help. And then in that time, you were working with them to encourage them to sort of work with our employment initiatives team, as I mentioned earlier, or other organisations. It could be the number of referrals that we've done to our local mental health team, for example. We've had GPs that, bless them, have come out on their lunchtime to go out with us and see somebody we've been concerned about. And we've had a real link with the community, and we're missing out on that. So it's the vulnerable people I'm worried about. We have a pot of money called, in a scheme we call Help To. It was sort of an initiative that we came up with in the Benefit and Money Advice team around about the time the crisis loans started to vanish from the job centre. It was simply saying to the management team at Cheltenham Borough Homes, look, there's some people here that haven't got a fridge. They're moving in, they haven't got a fridge. There are pots of money we can go to, there's charities we can go to, but sometimes you just need to be able to resolve it there and then. It's an immediate win. I have a petty cash tin that I can't access because that's locked at my desk. I am able to access a credit card, but again, we would like to engage with people. We'd like to ensure that if everything we can do in terms of benefit maximisation has been done, that we're then encouraging them to work with the support services that are appropriate to their needs, be it debt advice, be it sort of the NHS, be it the mental health, the general GP, the loan shark side of things, if there's a concern there. And that worries me at the moment. Those were the people that would come to our very popular and well-attended drop-in. Those are the people that we're not seeing. We are getting our colleagues support. They're fantastic, obviously doing their job at the moment. Luckily, they had a huge project that they did in the last 18 months, 2 years, where they were doing intensive visits to everybody, our tenancy management team. So they were identifying properties at different levels of if you like, capability to sustain their tenancy, and the system we have at the moment is marked up at different levels. So they are doing their welfare calls to those that they've identified as, maybe, as Ellie was saying, maybe those categories that are at higher risk. And we've got housing support officers that are calling our individuals in the shelter scheme, and we're getting referrals and general questions from that. But we are noticing a demand on ourselves. There is certainly an increase in anxiety of those that we're working with, but it's also a change of client group. We're seeing more at the moment of people who've maybe not claimed benefits before, maybe not accessed our service before, and lost their job. They're uncertain of what to do. Again, so it echoes, if we're seeing this shift and our percentages of cases are here, we've got to then find a way of making sure that the ones that would previously come to us, the ones we've maybe classed as more vulnerable, are not forgotten. And we're having to look at that as a team at the moment. The issue is, if those have fallen off the radar after all the work and support that we and colleagues and external agencies have done, are they then at risk of falling into debt? Are they at risk of falling into sort of the hands of somebody who is a legitimate lender, for example, like a doorstop lender, but putting them in further debt down the line, or unfortunately the illegal sources as well. We've been very fortunate to be a very active participant at the Gloucestershire Suicide Prevention Partnership. and that's done by Gloucestershire County Council, very, very well attended. And the job centre, the DWP side of things, do a vulnerable and complex need working group. The attendees to these are very similar, but the vulnerable and complex need is focused more on Cheltenham and the Suicide Prevention Partnership Gloucestershire. The beauty of that, and having been an avid sort of participant in that for a long time, is we picked up support for free training. My team have done NVQ level 2s in mental health awareness. We've all done the ASSIST training, which is applied suicide intervention skills training. Unfortunately, we have encountered cases over the years where somebody has told us that they had intentions to take their own life. We saw that predominantly around money problems. So from our point of view, I'm pleased that we've done those over the last few years and refreshed them recently, because again, we may be entering a time where people's mental health and worries over finances are increasing. So lots going on at the moment, but as I mentioned earlier, the team sort of has come down in size and the caseloads have gone up. So at the moment, we are very, very proud of the togetherness within the organisation and externally to be able to provide the help. And at the moment, we're very confident that anybody that's asking for help is getting it, but it is certainly very tough to deliver.
Yeah, definitely. And the solutions that are helping. So you mentioned there, Grant, about the sort of partnership areas. If I could turn to the calculator, I've got a couple of slides coming up here that I'm going to ask you to talk through actually. But it's around these points about helping people to understand their income and the support available, and also helping you as a team to spot and then support potential illegal money lending victims. So if I move then to this first slide. You'll recognise this, Grant, won't you? This is about this is from the calculator. Talk us through what's going on this slide and how this might be something that you would use.
So, I mean, quite simply, if there's people that are using your calculator already, they're probably aware of these themselves. But from my point of view, from the few years where I was sort of assisting the management team at Cheltenham Job Centre, we did actually have access to an old benefit calculator, and not sure if people are aware, but the Job Centre don't provide that anymore. So it's left to likes of external agencies and housing organisations to do so. What we have found over the years is you can sit down and explain things to people in terms of their benefit entitlement, but they might not fully grasp the numbers. Visuals certainly help. So from our point of view, having this mechanism here to be able to say to people, okay, you might not sort of understand the 2,700, for example. Again, this is a scenario that you guys have created for me, so I'm sure the figures will be certainly different for each household. But we're able to say, look, this is where you were, or this is where your situation is, and we're able to explain the breakdown of the entitlements. And the colour coding certainly helps because we're able to sort of relate to those. The importance of it is the simplicity of being a bar graph, where we can turn around and say to somebody, look, there's clearly a problem because what was coming in and what has changed is there's a significant drop. That gets people more willing to talk to us and be a little bit more open. From sort of, as I spoke to yourself about, Janet, from debts, from money, from health, from illegal money lending, from suicide, unfortunately, unless you ask a direct question, you're not usually going to get the answer. With a bar chart such as this one and some of the other visuals you've got on some of the other slides, it's easy to turn around to somebody and say, look, there's clearly a problem because the figures don't add up. Talk to me, let me try and help you. And this is what we use it for. We try and use it to identify whether there's a problem with money, whether there's money going out, whether they're actually fully sort of considered their budgets and aware properly of how much they're spending. We also know there's a lot of scams going on at the moment through the journals and through HMRC, etc., and loans, unfortunately. So people are turning to these and losing money from it, and people are embarrassed to turn around and say, yes, my credit card's this, or yes, my overdraft's this, or yes, I owe people money. So from the one you've gone to now, quite clearly, again, the priority for me and my team is not necessarily the figures as such, as the fact that, again, you can see that your costs are outstripping your income. Now, the one you've highlighted in light blue, sort of the £300, and we've sort of said debts there. We tend to find a lot of the time when referrals come to us either from internal colleagues or externally. When we do a budget with somebody, first of all, we tend to have to turn around and say, well, why are you falling behind your rent? Because actually, this looks as if you can manage. And it's not until we actually start probing a little bit more, they start to trust us and start to realise actually we're there to help, that maybe that £300 is declared. It's then you can explore it. And it might simply be catalogues. It might be that they were working and they were managing, but things have got on top of them. Sometimes though, and this is what we're missing about the face-to-face, or as I say, I am because of the length of time sort of I've been doing the role, it's that looking somebody in the eye and their body language, and you say to them, you know, where's the debt come from? And you question them a little bit more, and their body language change, or they start to shuffle in the seat a little bit. You know, there's more to it. They might not tell you. They might not tell you at all. But the issue is if we can just put a little bit of reassurance their way, and even just sort of give them sort of a business card with the local debt support agencies, or even the local illegal money lending team, if we feel it's appropriate, at least it's being addressed. And as you, again, thank you, moved on. So from this point of view, again, if we can sort of highlight to them that, hang on, look, if you owe a bank, if you owe a credit card, if you owe a catalogue, or if you owe somebody who apparently is your friend but is charging you double what you've borrowed from them, and putting a bit of pressure on you, if we can get rid of that money through debt advice specialist or through the illegal money lending team, then your finances are going to be back in check and things are going to be more affordable. So it's very useful.
Yeah. Sorry, Grant, I was just going to bring out that it's the scenario functionality in the calculator that lets you show people, you know, so this is what you're currently like, but you know, this is what the situation could be if we did something about that, and you're seeing it back side by side. Really powerful.
Absolutely. I mean, I'll give you a scenario, and there was a young lady who was clearly having a lot of difficulties with her finances, and no matter how much we sort of talked her through it, she just couldn't grasp it, unfortunately. She was getting support from other agencies for general family welfare, well-being and education, but she just couldn't grasp the fact that money didn't add up. We used this sort of tool to actually work out for her that she was buying sort of, I can't even think of the terminology we'd use for these things, but like Hello magazine and OK and all these sort of things on a daily basis, as well as a bottle of Coke from the shop every day. We used this to show her actually what her expenditure was simply on shopping. And we worked out that the spend on bottles of Coke and magazines was £1,475 a year. She was struggling a great deal, and as soon as we showed her on the bar graph the colour of just what was going out on bottles of Coke and magazines, she actually changed it, and we actually saw her change her shopping habits. And I actually bumped into her in one of the budget supermarkets with my wife one day, and I was so proud to actually see her in that supermarket doing, if you like, a big shop, because she'd actually grasped what was going on. So yeah, we find it very useful, but it's very useful as well to sometimes turn around to somebody and say, there's more to this here. When you feel ready, you know, please talk to me, because I think I can help you.
Brilliant. Changing the habits. And then on the self-serve side of the calculator, Grant, very quickly, just talk to us a little bit about how you're using this as an organisation.
So self-serve, but we actually, just before coronavirus, we were actually sat down as a team and said, you know what, we're not using this enough. When it does come through, it saves us a visit, it saves us you know, going to see somebody who actually has capabilities. It's something we could use remotely. We need to do a bit more of it. And as if by magic, coronavirus comes along, and fortunately, as I said, we had been doing some promotion of it, and we have shared with our colleagues to try and identify those who are a little bit more capable. And we've seen a real surge in inquiries coming to us through the self-service. And it's been fantastic, because again, we can use it as a triage system. We can turn around and say, well, hang on a minute, I'm concerned if this person goes and claims universal credit, they're going to lose their tax credits and probably be worse off in the long run. Or we can actually identify that there's people in the household that aren't claiming and should be. So it's something for the future that we definitely need to make sure we continue to push. It has really saved us some time, and it's been a real benefit to us.
Brilliant. Thank you, Grant. Thank you. I just want to very quickly just talk a little bit about a couple of other features in the calculator that we have changed, that we have updated, I suppose, in response to COVID-19 as well. And just to bring out a couple of other things. So if you already use our benefits and budgeting calculator, you'll know that we've amended the calculator to allow users to enter irregular earnings and estimate these for up to 12 months. And so this slide is showing that. So the impact of irregular earnings and the interaction with regular regular income will be shown through the calendar functionality, which you can see there on the right hand side of the screen. This will help advisors to provide advice to people with seasonal work and 0-hour contracts, as well as people who are self-employed and those receiving one-off larger payments, such as the coronavirus self-employed income support scheme, very snappily titled. But this feature allows advisors to explain the impact of these complex surplus earnings rule and the need, without the need for manual calculations, which I think is really important. And you'll always also be able to advise clients on restarting their UC claim and how much they're likely to receive once surplus earnings are used up. But this is a really complex area, as I say, and so we're going to be covering the policy behind it as well as the calculator functionality in more depth on our webinar on the 1st of July. So please do sign up to that webinar via the survey if this is of interest to you, and we will talk about that in more detail. Brilliant. Okay, so let me then move on to some other changes very, very quickly. So the number of people, unsurprisingly, that have used our calculator has increased significantly as a result of COVID-19, but we've introduced some changes to the calculator to put universal credit at the fore of the benefit system and to take account of the new circumstances of people. So those are, for example, the results of working age users. We now show universal credit by default because more households are moving to universal credit, and there's also some work that we've done with contributory benefits as well, and we've also done work on the other areas that you can see there on the screen. So if you want more details about that, then do ask us, but just the point really is that we have changed and flexed the software according to the current situation. So thank you ever so much, Grant. Let me now move over to Ellie to talk about the present situation with Tower Hamlets.
Yeah, so as I said, we've quite reasonably successfully managed to set up some short-term solutions. I guess slightly differently to the poll for us, we're slightly less concerned than the majority seem to be about identifying the vulnerable groups, purely because we're satisfied that the data that we've managed to get from the LIFT dashboard will be identifying the huge majority, and the others, you know, that aren't necessarily financially vulnerable. We've got our children's services and adult social care teams doing work on those, but we're quite satisfied that the data that we've got is helping us to actually identify those groups, and has done so very, very quickly. Our bigger concern is how we're going to meet ongoing demand. So in terms of the food hub that we've set up for isolating people, you know, we're spending, as it shows, about £30,000 a week on food. We've redeployed loads of staff to work both on that and to work on our isolation mailbox and in other places. But because of the demand on the food hub, we're running it from 8 till 8 and running it at weekends as well. So we are still looking at staff being on overtime. So even though their normal contracts are being pulled in, we do have a lot of overtime costs there. So keeping that sustainable just really isn't going to happen, particularly with the uncertainty of what central government are actually going to give councils in return for the coronavirus response. So what we're looking at is how do we continue to support the most vulnerable. So something that we have noticed is that through those food hubs, they're really only intended to give people kind of 2 packages maximum, because bearing in mind they are based on people that are isolating, that should be the maximum length of time. Now, that there may be the odd time that someone needs to re-isolate, but as a general rule, that should be it. But we've seen quite a lot of people coming back 3, 4, 5, 6 times. So with those particular people, we've taken their details, we've given those to the outreach side of my team, and they've been contacting them to have discussions with them, and you know, as Grant was saying, using the calculator to work out what's actually going on in that household, because they're not isolating for 6 weeks. So there's obviously something that is a deeper problem that they need a different solution for. So we are, as I say, using the calculator to try and get behind what those particular issues are for people. So one of the things that we are doing in terms of trying to support the demand purely for food is we've set up a secondary hub, which is working with our local voluntary and community sector. We are blessed in Tower Hamlets that we do have a really vibrant, very large voluntary and community sector. And in addition to to the organisations that are usually there, another huge number, particularly for food, have stepped up to try and help people at this time. So we did have kind of 3 main food organisations that we would work with on a regular basis, and we're now up to 23, and the other 20 have sprung up purely as a result of what's going on at the moment. So we've set up a secondary hub where we're taking in large-scale deliveries from people like Felix and Fair Share and City Harvest, also some large corporate donations and other areas of fundraising. We're taking the deliveries into that large hub. We're coordinating with those food agencies every week about what their specific needs are. Some only work in ambient food, some are cooking food for people, so the types of food they can take are different. And we then make a weekly delivery. So at the moment, we're delivering about 4 or 5 tons of food a week to those organisations. We're also working closely with our local volunteer bureau. We've had about 2,000 extra people sign up to be volunteers. So where those agencies need more support from volunteers, we're linking them in that way. And we're also looking for ways to help them to find funding from kind of places like the Big Lottery, the London Community Fund. And my team is assisting them in writing those bids so that we can try and get some additional funding in for them. We have worked out that obviously, and I'm sure a lot of people have worked this out, digital literacy is more important than ever. Partly because huge numbers more of people are applying for universal credit, which is, as you all know, a web-based system. So to be able to apply for that, people need at least some level of digital knowledge. But the other 2 things that we've seen are that people who can't access digital are much more vulnerable in terms of isolation. That while the rest of us are, having Zoom calls and Skype calls and whatever else with our friends and family, that's not an option that's open to these people. And additionally, where we have households who are working from home and have their children from home, we've got, anecdotally, we've not got anything we can prove for this, but coming through the schools, difficulties because even where people have digital access, they may only have 1 laptop or tablet. So enabling a parent to work and a child to do their schoolwork at the same time has proved really difficult. As I mentioned before, we have high levels of gig economy and hospitality sector roles. So we're really concerned about what the impact on our residents and local businesses is going to be. Even when businesses can reopen, the hospitality sector are not going to be able to open like they were before. So there's going to be huge problems for people either in being laid off completely or in their hours being reduced, which again could then add to the levels of universal credit applications. And because of the amount of people that are going to be laid off, where employers do have vacancies, they're going to be able to take their pick of people. So those that are furthest from the workplace are going to find it increasingly difficult to get into work because there will be more qualified people than them going for every role at the moment. So really, those are the issues that we're seeing, which are quite a lot and do impact a lot on each other.
Okay, thanks, Ellie. I'm going to move on now to a bit like we did with Grant, talking about the calculator. I just want to I'd like you to walk through, Ellie, some of these rows to do with the lift dashboard. Again, this, no doubt, the slide on the screen here is one that you will be very familiar with. Talk to us about what this slide means for you then, Ellie, and I'll click through the next slides as well.
Yeah, so this is where we looked to see who our actual priority groups should be. So as you can see on this slide, it gives us an idea of the family breakdown, who have got school-age children, who have got children under 5. That's been a really important one to us because we've been able to make sure that those families are aware that they're entitled to Healthy Start vouchers. It shows us where the lone parents are, who again are more likely to be impacted by welfare reform. And the one that we decided to concentrate on firstly was the number of pensioners that are living alone, partly from the isolation point of view and partly so that we can check that they are claiming kind of pension credit and attendance allowance and everything that they're actually entitled to.
And I must just say, thanks, Ellie, that this is dummy data and a dummy map, so they're not real numbers at all, in case you were wondering about that. So no, then after you've identified the cohort.
So for the street level one,
the cohort, then yes.
Once we've identified a particular cohort, depending what interventions we want to do, it can then be quite useful for us to go down to street level. So, for example, one of the things that we're looking at, as I mentioned before, is something that's going to be of real interest to us is people that are out of employment, particularly those who've left recently, and might be slightly easier to get back into employment because they do have recent experience. We do offer a lot of different training courses, and we work with a lot of different employers. And one of the things that's going to be really useful to us is to be able to identify those unemployed cohorts, so that at a street level, we'll be able to do particular letter drops or leaflet drops, or particular advertising where we see that there are cohorts of people who are particularly in need of those kind of employment services, to make sure that people in those areas are aware of them. And it also means that when we can get back to a world where we can do things with people rather than completely remotely, that we can look for things like community centres within those areas, so that we can run digital courses or CV courses or that kind of thing from the local area, so that people don't have to come out very far, which obviously can be quite a barrier to some people. Our employment office, although the borough is not huge, people in the borough are particularly wedded to the areas that they live in. So our employment office is in Poplar, and getting someone to come from Stepney Green, which is 2.5 miles away, to Poplar, can in itself be quite a challenge. So the more that we can do locally for those people, and the more that we can target that, the better that will be for us and for the residents. The identification to household level is one that we use a lot, and this is what enables us to do our really impactful proactive work. So what we're using this for at the moment is we're identifying households who the dashboard tell us are struggling or who are in crisis, who we believe might be eligible for a discretionary housing payment. So we're able to find out exactly who each of those households are, and then some people on my team, and we've had such good success with this that even in current times we are about to advertise for 2 more posts to work solely on this project, where people will proactively make contact with those households who we think that if we can get in there offering them that discretionary housing payment that will save their tenancy, that will then also not only be able to do that, but they'll be in a position to work with us to try and sort out their longer term financial issues, and from there to try and help perhaps sort out employment issues where that is, or any issues with the children or something like that. So being able to get in with people with a very specific offer that is relevant to them is really important to us. And something like discretionary housing payment is one that we've selected, because obviously people that are worried about their housing and whether they're going to lose their house really don't have the headspace to be thinking any further forward. This slide here, obviously the understanding the household journey, enables us to see what's going on in the household, where our intervention kicked in, and what financial impact it's had on the household. So it won't necessarily be our intervention that's done everything, but that's usually a kick-off point, at least, for people to start doing things both for themselves and with us. So we can then track this longitudinally through the households, which enables us both to see which interventions work and which ones don't. So which ones we ought to repeat, which ones we need to tweak, and which ones we should just get rid of altogether in favour of something new. But it also works really well for us for business cases. The new posts that we're about to do, we were able to get those posts because we could show that our direct intervention on VHP had helped households so much that the cost benefit to the authority made it worth putting more resource into actually doing that role.
Thanks for talking us through that, Ellie. And I know from many of our other clients that are taking or being proactive, are looking at kind of 3-pronged approaches as well, which I know you've spoke about previously, which is, proving successful. So leaflet drops, specific letters with a call to action, and phone calls. So kind of tackling these at different levels. So like you say, identifying that big cohort and sending letters out or leaflets out, getting more specific, sending a specific letter out, and then doing the phone calls at this stage where you're understanding that household journey. I suppose one of the questions or thoughts our audience will have is, we have so much demand, and you know, taking into account the fact that, you know, many people, 50% have said that, you know, they're concerned about reaching the most vulnerable households. But taking that into consideration, most will say, you know, we have so much demand, we don't have time or resource to carry out this kind of proactive approach. So I know, Ellie, as you've talked through, you've seen a huge amount of increase in demand across your service and across the organisation. So why has this proactive approach been so important to you, your team, and the organisation?
So, you know, as an organisation, as I said, our poverty levels are so high that sorting out issues that have people in poverty and getting them out of it has to be a core priority for us. So putting resource into this kind of work is a really important thing for us to do. As I say, my team normally do a much broader selection of work, and we've dropped quite a number of things that we think are important, but are not as important as getting this done. So we've prioritised this above other things. We have also started, through the calculator, we've started training members of other teams. So if they're seeing clients, they can at least do some initial work with them before perhaps passing them on to us if they need anything more in depth. What we find as well is that, of course, purely, you know, this has really, really good impacts from the resident, but, you know, let's not be about the bush. For all of our organisations at the moment, there is going to be a real financial issue. And we find that by doing this kind of proactive work, we can actually save or at least avoid costs for a lot of things. So by giving someone a discretionary housing payment at the point where they might not apply to us, but we can still save their tenancy, you know, a standard homelessness case can cost between £10,000 and £15,000 a person. So by putting in the resource at this end, it does mean that we're seeing savings in other areas of the council, which, as I say, has then helped us make our business case to increase the amount of work that we're doing at this end. From a resident point of view, we're contacting, one of the things we found really useful was that we were able to isolate private tenants who were on housing benefit. And private tenants are far less likely to know about things like discretionary housing payments. You know, housing associations might apply on someone's behalf. A private landlord is not going to do that. So the fact that we have an inroad to reach people that probably no other area of the council actually will, has made a real impact to us. And as we say, it also then enables us to make sure they're getting the right benefits, that they're getting Healthy Start vouchers, that they're getting pension credit, their free TV licence, all of these additional things. So for us, you know, I'm not going to say it was easy. We did have to do a fair bit of analysis and discussion with the members and with the mayor, but it was seen as something that the council should be doing.
Brilliant.
Very interesting. Thanks, Ellie. I'm going to move on because we want to talk about the future. Now, I know, and we're going to have plenty of time, I hope, to cover this. And I do appreciate, though, that we are up, we're nearly towards the end of the allotted time for the webinar. So please do stay with us. I know that Grant and Ellie hopefully can stick around as well. And we do want to get to the Q&A. So do bear with us. And we may be another sort of 10, 15 minutes from here on in. But without further ado, let me talk then to yourself, come back to you, Grant, about the future. And can you quite succinctly tell us about Cheltenham Borough Homes and what the future is looking like for you guys?
From an organisation point of view, obviously things are still a little unclear. I know that the team are working, well, the management teams, if you like, are working with the focus of the communities, our residents and our all colleagues in mind, which is, as I said, is really reassuring. But we want to try and get back to a level of normality as quickly as possible. My concern from the benefit money advice side of things is when DWP and particularly universal credit claims, will the easements and relaxations of rules change? As Ellie mentioned, the risks to people with maybe some of the lower skills or further away from the job market at the moment are going to be up against some severe competition for the fewer number of jobs. And without us being able to work face to face with our employment initiatives teams, etc., and not knowing what that's going to look like at the moment is a real concern. Again, touching on the financial side of things, we don't know at the moment to how bad people's finances are. Again, until we're face to face with people and gathering this paperwork, it's very hard to sort of to understand that and also assist them. But if we look at it from a debt point of view, we will be proactively looking at the housing with the housing revenues officers. We'll be looking at the rent accounts that have maybe slipped or have increased, or new ones, and we're proactively contacting those to let them know that we exist, not just from our sort of income maximisation and general sort of support, but also we can share our colleagues, external colleagues, expertise, the debt advice agencies and the illegal money lending team, just to name those guys again. But from the illegal money lending team, which, as I said, it's a real concern of mine. Cheltenham, we don't know what the statistics are. We're not saying it's huge in Cheltenham, but we do know that there is some activity. But if we look at it from a legal money lending team, we intend to keep working with them. We have secured proceeds of crime money from them, from putting in a bid to say what we want to deliver and how we feel that's going to positively impact our communities and our residents. What I found was interesting is that they, when they were set up, originally, I think it was initiative in 2004, and then nationally 2011. So we've been working with them since they sort of, pretty much since they took off. But before they actually took off, there hadn't been a prosecution for a loan shark for over 20 years. Now, they're estimating that 310,000 households are affected, and 75% of those being on benefits and 75% of those being in rented or social housing. So from my world, it's going to be very interesting. We already know our rent arrears are increasing. We know that there's relaxation on obviously evictions and possessions, which is clearly the right thing to be doing. But the real worry is at the moment is how we maintain and keep supporting people that are going to be affected as soon as, I said, the DWP restrictions are lifted. I think there's opportunities to keep working with our partners. We're doing incredibly well, as I said, and it's the togetherness. We're so proud of it. The community are really pulling together and signposting everywhere. That is going to be imperative moving forward. What the whole service looks like, I think, is still in early days of almost, do we need to reinvent? Do we need to change? Do we need to adjust? Would love to have more face-to-face. How that would look at the moment, still on the drawing table.
Thank you, Grant. And yes, the future, we just don't know what it's going to hold. But I think some of these solutions here that we talked about previously, having the committed and determined team and the lessons that have been learned, lots of really good stuff to build on. I think it's fair to say. Jay, did you want to talk a bit about Tower Hamlets, or will I go straight to Ellie on this?
Yeah, I mean, I'll just to kind of add really on some of what Grant was saying there, but from the many conversations we've had with CABs, housing organisations, and of course councils, that across the board there is a sense that despite the increase in demand on the services that we're already seeing, that this is the quiet before the storm. As you mentioned, Grant, with collections and evictions on hold, increased government support, increased council support, that we're yet to really see the true impacts of COVID, and that we expect to see the impacts of that for a long period of time. And I suppose for Ellie, it would be really good for you to give us your views of that and how you plan to prepare for it.
Sorry, Jade. My connection went down there, and I caught the question and not what it was about. Sorry.
Yeah, so I was just talking there about, this is the quiet before the storm in terms of collections and evictions being held, government support increases, increased council support. So, what's your views of that, and kind of what you plan to do to prepare for that?
Yeah, so I think our main preparation, there's I guess kind of a three-pronged approach, which is going to be to continue and to ramp up the work we're doing on the proactive side, to try and prevent some of that homelessness and to try and increase people's income before it becomes a real issue for them. We do have a big concern that there will be a homelessness spike sort of a bit later in the year, because there is, of course, the temporary stay on evictions at the moment. But we don't know when that temporary stay will be lifted, and we could see a large amount of private sector households being evicted at that point. So the more work we can do with them, the better. And again, we've written out to them, and we're starting to do the work in terms of calling them. Our employment team have started to look at how they're going to work for the future. They've started to put more stuff online. We're looking at quite a large inclusive broadband project with them, working with specific households to get them on broadband and hopefully to supply some equipment. And something else we're looking at is, due to the huge increase in need in the voluntary sector, we're looking at how we can use the apprenticeship levy to get people into roles that would be advice roles, working with those organisations. So that is in this kind of time, that's something that's perhaps opened itself up to us. In terms of food, we're going to be doing a lot more work with the voluntary and community sector, really ramping up the hub that we've got working with them and hoping to bring ours down altogether so that we can repurpose some of that funding into the other projects. But really for us, it's going to be a case of, at the moment, obviously we get the quarterly reports from policy and practice. We're just getting all of the data agreements signed up so that we can go to the automation for the monthly reports, and we think that having that monthly reporting is going to help us a lot more in keeping an eye on what's going on in people's households, and enable us to respond much more quickly where there is a need, rather than waiting, kind of if at the moment if someone, for example, fell out of work in January, and we were relying on data, we might not find out until kind of the middle of April. Whereas on a monthly review, it will enable us to see all of that information a lot more quickly, and therefore to start working to support that household a lot more quickly.
And Ellie,
Sure.
I suppose just on that point, I was just bring out the fifth slide from the dashboard, which is about tracking outcomes over time, which I think kind of points to what you're saying there.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is something, as I say, that we do use a lot. To see how our intervention has helped people, both from the point of view of the individual and to help us work out what we're doing works well, and what's missing, and what isn't working well for us, and that we should look to change.
Excellent. Jade, is there anything that you'd like to ask Ellie about this section before I move on to what policy and practice is doing with future modelling?
No, I mean, I think I'm very conscious of time, Jen, and I think sort of Ellie's covered most of it there, and that kind of tracking of a cohort as tracking of an individual. And I think you've sort of pulled out these points previously, Ellie, that, you may do a piece of work in the arrears section, or your employment team may be supporting a particular individual around getting them into work. But what we don't see is the impact that has across various different areas. And what this tracker allows you to do is really pull that out. I think another point on this is that we start to see the churn. I think a lot of teams work extremely hard, particularly, with the homelessness side of things or bringing debts down, etc. And at this time with COVID going on, we may not actually see the results of that. So if you can kind of see that section down there, Janet, where it's got 1, 7 and 8, what we wouldn't be able to see without tracking that is that actually, 2,000 may have popped in, but 3,000 have popped out. So we've done a huge amount of work to limit the impacts or improve people's circumstances. But that may not necessarily be seen in the bigger picture numbers, etc. So this is really great for kind of helping get that overall understanding of the impacts on an individual or a campaign.
Lovely, thanks, Jade. And just finally, in terms of the sort of meat of the webinar, I just wanted to, as I mentioned there, pick up a little bit on what policy and practice is looking at and doing for this the future modelling, because of course none of us knows what the future holds. It's difficult to make projections about what the policy landscape will look like, what the wider economic trends will be, and what will happen to different groups of people. But we do need to make projections because we need to see implications for demand, for our supports and services, and indebtedness as well. So policy and practice, we've changed our policy modelling due to COVID-19, and this is our number one analytics priority right now. So we've developed two approaches. We're looking at we want to know what's happened to the current cohort. So with that, we're building flexibility into our analytics so that we can do multiple scenario policy modelling. So for example, if all COVID-19 related changes end after 1 year, which is what's currently planned, or if they're all retained, or indeed if there's something in the middle, which is more likely, we suppose. So what's going to happen to the current cohort? And then number two, what's the new cohort of households going to be? So depending on employment impact of the pandemic, for example, some of the awful statistics that were made headlines on the news last night about major job losses, and also if hours are reduced once people people come off furlough, the benefit caseload for local authorities could be majorly impacted. So the modelling is based on our policy analysis, using numbers on our analysis, and also using numbers from the OBR, which gives us the best case scenario because they assume everyone on furlough returns to work, and then correspondingly with stats from Blanchflower and Bloom, who give us the worst case scenario because they assume no one returns to work. So of course there are the parameters. So on the latter assumption, people coming off furlough becoming unemployed will therefore claim UC and therefore grow the local authority caseload. So how you can use this kind of modelling, how this is going to be helpful. With the information about the new caseloads, you'll be able to identify people that you'll be able to help back to financial independence quicker. And as Ellie said, that frequency of data uploads really just plays to that point. So that could be, for example, people who may be closer to the job market who you can target employment support to, or maybe people in arrears who you can target discretionary support to help them come out of arrears, to get them on a sounder footing. This modelling can also help councils look towards recovery. For example, the insights can help you understand where in your service your money is most going to be needed and where it will be most effective in tackling vulnerability. And a bit like I was mentioning earlier about the surplus earnings, we know this is a complex area, and I'm sure it's an area that's going to be interesting. So we're going to be covering it in more detail on a webinar on the 17th of June. So do please sign up via the question and the follow-up survey if this is going to be of interest to you, and we look forward to seeing you there and talking about it in more detail. Brilliant. So thank you very much. So that brings us to the Q&A section of the webinar. So thank you very much to our speakers, and let me pick up a question, I think, Ellie, to you, if I may, first. What are your long-term plans for homelessness and rough sleeping after the lockdown period, especially when it sounds like most councils have trialled housing first or neighbourhood approaches? What would you say to that?
I have to say, I'm really sorry, but that's quite difficult for me to answer because I don't sit within the homelessness team. I just do specific items of work with them. I can certainly go back and ask the question, but other than the work that we're doing proactively with private renters and DHP, I've not currently been privy to any of the conversations about, when the government stopped funding the current money to get everybody off the streets and that kind of thing. Sorry, it's just not my service area.
Okay, no problem at all. I'll move on then. So a question possibly to yourself first, Ellie, and then maybe the same question to you, Grant. Has the number of people engaging with support services reduced since COVID-19 started?
No, it's hugely increased. We work with, as I say, the voluntary and community sector. We have large contracts with them to provide welfare advice, and the information they're giving us is, so they very quickly moved their services online and by phone, and the information they're giving us is that depending on the organisation, because some of them specialise in debt and some in benefits and different things, but they've actually seen an increase of between kind of 20 and 40% of people seeing them. Equally, when we've had people filling out the isolation forms and telling us they need food, probably about 30% of them have asked for some form of debt or financial advice as well. So we've been either contacting them or making referrals for those people as well. Befriending services have also gone completely through the roof.
Thanks, Ellie. How about you, Grant? What impact have you seen on support services?
So from my team alone, as a team of 4 last year, we had 140 cases that we were desperate to reduce. That doesn't include general inquiries. That was cases that were going to be with us sort of longer term because of claim issues, tribunals, mandatory reconsiderations, that sort of thing. We've now got, bearing in mind, I've had a change of personnel as well. We peaked at 333 the other day. And that's while still dealing with inquiries from internal teams and external colleagues as well. I mean, we've had calls from NHS staff at hospitals, general support workers, food banks sort of letting us know, job centres let us know welfare concerns about particular tenants of ours. So 333 cases for a significantly changed shape of team. And we, as Ellie and Jade has mentioned, well, personally feel is going to come again. I think we're going to get a second wave as well.
Thank you. And I suppose sticking with yourself, Grant, have you How have you seen demand for energy from your tenants? So have you seen an increase in demand for energy?
Yeah, it's always been an issue. Food and utility support has always been an issue, and we would tend to use our help to sort of petty cash to identify obviously very genuine cases and support them. And again, same as food, it should be sort of a short-term measure, overcome a crisis so that people can get through that and then sort of sustain themselves moving forward. At the moment, the community throughout Gloucestershire, but I know from Cheltenham point of view, is fantastic with food. But the inquiries for gas and electric have certainly gone up again, and it's very difficult to help. However, we do direct everybody to their utility company, because work the government have done with them, there has been more support available from the utility firms to top up the prepayment meters. And one of our colleagues within the organisation, she deals with energy and sustainability from our depot and repair team. She is working with an agency at the moment to see whether they can support us with regards to providing vouchers to cases that we identify. But yes, we've definitely seen an increase in that as well.
Lovely, thank you. I have lots of different questions here, but I'm very mindful of time. There's a question here, I think, Ellie, back to yourself, and it's talking about your approach to engaging with people, I suppose, and by identifying people. So in this particular instance, the question is around older people saying that older people don't claim what they're entitled to. How are you specifically targeting this cohort, as they tend not to ask? But then when you do put it to them, how do you can't force the issue about them claiming benefits. What would your approach be? So I suppose it's a bit double-barreled about identifying and then getting that engagement and encouraging people to claim.
So we ran a campaign at the beginning of this year on specifically on pension credit, where we use the dashboard to identify households that were eligible for pension credit and not claiming it. And for that particular campaign, that was just done by letters. But our next run did show a huge increase, and a lot of people contacted us to say thank you. They hadn't realised how easy it was. They hadn't realised that they could do it. We saw increases of as small as kind of £30 a week, which, if you're struggling, £30 a week is still a lot of money. But the highest claim we saw was £150 a week. So we did see quite a lot of people make claims as a result just of the letter and us showing how easy it was. Our next plan for that, which was meant to be happening now, but obviously has been a little held up, is that we're going to send out a letter again. But what we're going to do is send that out in targeted cohorts according to postcode. And we're then going to find a community centre or somewhere central to that postcode, where I'm going to have a member of staff sitting, so that people can come out and see that member of staff who will actually help them to make the application and talk them through everything that they need to do with it. We have found, certainly Age UK have fed back to us that they've had difficulties in getting people to apply. But we made the language of the letter very clear that this was an entitlement. This wasn't about, just taking something. This is what you've paid your NI stamp for all these years, and you're entitled to this money. This is what the government says you need to live on. So, X amount of people are claiming it. This is the average that people have managed to claim from it. So it is worth you doing it. And we have seen, as I say, a good uptake in that. We are expecting, once we can do the bit offering the support as well, we're expecting that to see a lot higher.
And I can definitely echo from other organisations that we're working with that picking up the phone and speaking to these households, these pensioner households, has also been very successful. I think the average rate has been a 60% take-up rate from at least a 1, 2 or 3 week campaign. So very short, sharp campaigns, but a huge amount of success to get them to take it up.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Thanks very much, Jade. I'm going to leave it there because I am very conscious we're quite out of time, and I know that people are apologising to me that they're having to leave. So thank you that's very polite of you. Just let me finish up then by just pointing you to some tools that could help. We haven't mentioned it too much on this webinar, but you might have seen it on previous webinars. But we do have a coronavirus page full of breakdown of all of the welfare policy changes that have been announced over recent times, and also applied to different circumstances as well. And we've got lots and lots of Q&As that we're answering, over 1,000 on there. at the moment. So please do look at that, and indeed link to that from your own websites if you think that's going to be useful to you. Like I said, we will have a follow-up email with this webinar recording and slides directly, and there will be a short survey that's going to follow immediately after I finish the webinar here. I just mentioned a few webinars, so there's 3 coming up. We're talking about on the 3rd of June, is your post-COVID-19 council tax support scheme sustainable? I know that is a huge area of concern for a lot of people. How will data analytics help councils look to recovery? So that's picking up a little bit on some of the points that we've covered today very briefly. And also the thing I mentioned earlier about how to simplify the complexity of surplus earnings, and that's on Wednesday, the 1st of July. And you can sign up in the email that follows immediately after the webinar. And we'd love to see you on that call, on those webinars then. So, without further ado, Jade, I'll leave it to you to give the thanks today, if that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks everyone for joining us, and thanks so much to Ellie and Grant for taking the time to join us today and share their experiences. And a bye from me, and I'll hand over then to say bye too.
Brilliant, lovely. Thanks very much, Grant. Thanks, Ellie, and thanks everybody for joining us. Take care, and we'll see you again soon. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks everyone.